Hello, everyone. Well, look at us. I am so pleased for all of you to be here and deeply, deeply grateful. First, I have to do some housekeeping, and that's written down for me, so I do it correctly. Tables outside are for you. Whenever, go outside for lunch, dinner, breakfast, and enjoy the lovely, humid, extremely hot weather in Florida. And then everyone has a T-shirt. So I'd like you to wear it tomorrow, and at 6:45 outside in the hot weather, we're going to have a photo. So please wear your T-shirt tomorrow. And last, there's a reception this evening in A. I think I'm pointing in the right direction. And in that reception, there'll be lots of booths and lots of people to talk to, and there'll be drinks and hors d'oeuvres and hopefully a night of really just joining each other. So, my name is Pat Furlong. I'm part of the staff of PPMD, and we're 30 years old. I think that might be a surprise to all of you, but we started in 1994. We started a long time ago, and we're 30 years now. So first, and for those of you who ask, I was 25. So, I wanted to thank our sponsors. Sarepta has been an amazing support for us, and really, as we know, we have a new approval of gene therapy, so something to celebrate. Pfizer and Catalyst also sponsors, and we're deeply grateful for the support for this meeting. There are about 1,400 people in the House, so we're incredibly surprised and delighted for all of you to be here. And all of the others, we have Dyne, Avidity, Edgewise, ITF Therapeutics, that it's the Tal Pharmaco, NS Pharma, Usher Smith, and Wave. So grateful to our sponsors. And I wanted to also say I'm deeply grateful. PPMD has 23 people on its team. I'm sure you saw some of them or most of them here. We only left a few behind to keep track of things while we're gone. And this team has really pulled together and done things that have amazed me, surprised me, and made me deeply grateful. Also, the board of PPMD, they've put up with me, in particular John Killian, for a number of years, and he will tell you I've probably made him sweat some blood, sweat, and tears along the way as we progressed. But we have a wonderful board of people, and I hope you'll take time to meet them. All right, here we go. So the PPMD way. 30 years ago, Donna Sacamano, who's not here, and I thought to ourselves, could we do something? I will say to you that our first big meeting was here in Orlando, Florida. But before that, we met with a number of about 20 basic scientists in Canada, and we asked them if we thought, or they thought, we could do something. And I think they were a little bit frightened of us, to be honest, because we had a person come in and say, I can fix this in a minute, and that started an argument about we need other stuff. We need money, we need collaborations, we need basic science, we need data. They had lots of ideas about what we needed, and the person who was a basic scientist out of Pasadena, California, an oncologist, when he made the statement, we can do this in a minute, that led to this argument, which led to a discussion about what was needed. So we started. So this is what we do. We have 4 pillars: research, advocacy, care, and education. And sometimes you wonder what you do and why you do it, and they all move together because you have to really think about how can you make this work. So we accelerate research because that's how we get to clinical trials. We also work on policy. We're always in Washington, frequently in Washington. We have an advocacy meeting, usually at the end of February, early March, and we ask our congressmen, those who represent us, to really think about Duchenne and Becker muscular dystrophy. We are interested in treatments for every single family member, and that is young men with Duchenne, female carriers, men with Becker. We really want every child and every person that's affected by this diagnosis to be treated. So this was a long time ago. This was one of our first conferences. This is one in Pittsburgh. We started off in Orlando. Number 2 was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and there were only about 20 people in the room. There were some basic scientists. I won't tell you any of the gory details of that meeting, but I will say, I think we decided that if we all worked together, if we shared our voices, we could do something, and hopefully it would be something big. So we started at that point. We wanted to build a community. I think one of the hardest things of a diagnosis, any diagnosis, but in particular Duchenne and sometimes Becker feel the same, is that you feel pretty alone in the diagnosis. And I can tell you when my 2 boys, Christopher and Patrick, were diagnosed, I felt pretty alone. I live in a small town called Middletown, Ohio. No one had heard of the word Duchenne, nor had I, to be honest, when they said it out loud, even though in my clinical rotations through nursing, I was in pediatrics, but I closed my eyes and didn't do very well in peds because I really didn't think children should be sick. So I spent my career in adult nursing, not pediatric nursing. So when the doctor said the word Duchenne out loud, I was really puzzled. So what does that mean, and where do I go, and what do I do? And when the doctor said nothing, it was really pretty devastating. So you begin to feel very alone. So the first thing we had to do is build community. We had to find our us, like us. We had to find someone who knew something about this disease and was willing to work with us. Even more importantly, we had to find a friend. We had to find another family that we could talk to, because I think that really helps you work through all of the feelings you have and all the questions you may have. And then you have to find a team of doctors that are really in sync with not only care, but clinical trials and research, and how can we work together? So we first built community. And I think that represents us here, all 1,400 of us, the community we serve. It's the power of us, right? Because together, when we work together, we can just do anything. We can have the resolve to change the world, and I think we are together doing just that. So community is at the heart of what we do. We talk to each other, we work with each other, we work with our clinicians, we work with our community, we work with government. And soon, we'll be expanding, as you might imagine, our work with the payers, because we know with 8 approvals, we need combination therapies. We need to make sure that the payers understand that need, that all these boys and girls and women are going to need combination therapies to end Duchenne. So research. You know, research is a lot of things, and at first, when we started, we had to do basic research. These are the people with the mice. You know, how many times have we seen mice in a cage? You know, enough to say, no more mice. And then we saw those nice little green rings around dystrophin, so we learned that. And for early meetings, we saw dogs, so we saw the mice, and then we saw the dogs, and we saw the this, and we were like tired of it. But that's how you build and understand what a therapy or an intervention might do. And while the animals aren't like us, they aren't like people, they do give us insight into what you're looking at in terms of a therapeutic strategy. So we had to fund basic research and try to get that moving. And I'd like to say we don't have to do it anymore, but we're always going to be in a state of learning. We always want to know more and more and more, because we know that not all treatments work the same on every individual. So in order to better understand that, you do more basic research. So we research across the translational medicine, and that is from that basic science, if I have an idea, through looking at it in animal models, through then moving up the chain and then figuring out how do you do a clinical trial, who would be involved, what's the outcome measures, and you're going to see outcome measures a little bit later today. There's a lot to do, and then of course there's a regulatory. This is FDA in the US, EMA in Europe. Do they agree with the data that's submitted that this should be approved? And as you all know, the more approvals, the more therapeutic options, the better. So care, fundamental, to find a group of physicians that listen to your voice, that hear your questions, that believe that there's no question off limits, because sometimes as parents, we have a question and we think maybe I shouldn't ask it, or maybe it's not good, or maybe it's dumb. I worried that a lot when I had Chris and Pat, because I'd ask some of the basic questions that I thought some of them would think, how could you even think that way? But as parents, we have lots of questions because we live 24/7 with the people we love. And so we want to know as much as we can. And this is where care comes in. You might know that in care, we have published standards of care. The Becker community will soon have published standards of care. The carrier community does not have standards of care. So we have work to do in terms of understanding what does care look like, who should be on the team to care for patients and families. And I'm sure some of you who go to the certified Duchenne care centers see a team of physicians, pulmonologists, cardiologists, neurologists, physical medicine folks, nurse practitioners, nurse educators. There's a whole team of people, and I think maybe some of you probably come away with, oh my God, I have a list of 1,000 to-dos and maybe can only accomplish one or two. So maybe one question of the care team is, what are the most important things that I need to think about today? So we work with our Duchenne care centers, we partner with them, and for 30 years we've been trying to move the needle on the best kind of care and treatment possible for every person affected with Duchenne. Advocacy. You know, when we started, I don't know if Lee Sweeney's in the audience, but we first met, one of the basic scientists that we have worked with for the last 30 years is a person by the name of Lee Sweeney. He was at the University of Pennsylvania and has moved some years back to the University of Florida, Gainesville. And Lee was sitting in next to me at one of our early conferences, and he said, "Do you mind if I say something really horrible?" And I thought, oh, well, yeah. And he said, you know, as parents working with this community and raising money by doing all the things you do, whatever those things are, races, fundraisers, all of that, you're going to have to leverage more money if you're going to move this field forward. So he said to me, you can't do a bake sale in Middletown, Ohio and expect to get science moved. Well, first of all, in Middletown, Ohio, we are not going to do a bake sale. But second of all, just because we all have enough girth not to do something like that. But he said, why don't you go to Washington and think about trying to move the government to notice this important disease? So we went to Washington. We had been, I'll say, harassing the Office of Rare Disease at the National Institutes of Health to convene a meeting. So in 2000, they agreed to convene a meeting on Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It was the first time that the National Institutes of Health ever convened such a meeting. And in convening that meeting, it was the first time Duchenne was mentioned on the NIH campus. It was quite an exciting day just to hear that and hear smart people talking about something that could be done. So we then hired a group of professional consultants, better known as lobbyists, in Washington, and their names are Fagre, Drinker at this moment, and they became our consultants. And together with the muscular dystrophy community, Sharon Hesterly at MDA, we wrote a piece of legislation called the Muscular Dystrophy Care Act, or the MD Care Act. It was introduced into the House and Senate in 2001, and it was signed into law by George W. Bush in 2001. So you might not like George W., but listen, he's a good guy, and he liked research. And that's advocacy, because by definition, when you get a diagnosis, you are an advocate. You have to educate yourself. You have to educate your family. You have to educate your community. And you have to educate your government, because you are tax-paying citizens and you deserve their attention. So that's exactly what we do. So we've had advocacy now for 20 years. So we advocate for everyone. We talk to people at the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Defense. We talk to people at the Center for Disease Control. And you might think, why those folks? Why would Center for Disease Control, who was all about the pandemic, for good or bad, why would you think they'd be interested? Because the Center for Disease Control has a bucket of cash in a part of their system called the National Center of Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities, or if you like acronyms, NCBDDD, because it's Washington, right? You have to have an acronym. So the CDC receives an earmark, for the most part, every single year of $7 million based on our advocacy, and they use that to understand the surveillance of this disease, who has it, how is the natural history of the disease, and also to really look at data around this disease, because data drives progress. And they're the ones that really convened the group of community experts to develop standards of care. So that's why the NC-BDDD matters, and that's why advocacy matters, because that's how we can get the government to move. So all that to say, care, research, advocacy matters. All of it matters, and all of it changes the world. So in the last 30 years, just now that I'll advertise what we've accomplished as a community, and again, I'm grateful to all of you because we've all had a hand in this. One person can't do a lot, but all of us can do something, and in doing something, we've moved the needle. So in the last 30 years, we've secured millions of dollars in funding. We have now 8 FDA approvals, which is pretty spectacular. I also know that soon is not soon enough, but we are going to continue until we have therapeutic options for everyone and as many as possible. We also go to Washington. We continue to go to Washington. We stand on the Hill and we talk about Duchenne and we go see the representatives that we have. And I will say to you that I don't know how Congress works. I still don't know how Congress works. I know we have an election going up, but none of the politics matters to us. What matters to us is the voice and the need for research. And so this is a bipartisan, if anything's bipartisan in the federal government, this one is. So that's why advocacy is quite important. So we've been there for 2 decades. The MD Care Act is passed. And we have in our research or in our investment and the MD Care Act have touched every single therapeutic that you're seeing today. I would venture to say that most of the basic science was invested in by us and by the National Institutes of Health. So here's where we are. $800 million out of the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Defense, and the Center for Disease Control. We still would love you in Washington, D.C. this year because depending on the election, we're going to need to really stimulate NIH to think about continuing and expanding their investment so that we can drive forward. There are 13,000 letters that have gone to Congress. And making a relationship with Congress is not just about a one-liner to your representative. It's about making a relationship. Back and forth, thank you for what you're doing, please do more, thank you again, back and forth. It's like dating. You don't have to marry them, but you do have to try dating them. We've also participated in other legislation. There's 4 bills to date, starting from the Children's Health Act, long ago to the MD Care Act, to other legislation that has come forward, and we've been working on that to make it go forward. We have started on newborn screening. It's pretty amazing that this team of mine was able to really develop a package for the RUSP, which is the Registered Uniform Screening Panel. So how newborn screening starts in the U.S., you have to submit a package to the RUSP, really confirming that we need to be screening children so that we can get early diagnosis, so that we can treat them early. The RUSP is hard. They're sometimes conservative, and we're right before them at near the end of this year. We'll know. That said, each state also has to agree to do newborn screening. So we've been lucky enough, thank you, Jason Dempsey, who's here. Ohio is a state that is doing newborn screening. New York is a state that's doing newborn screening. Minnesota is a state. And thank you to Merritt as well, who's helped us there. So families on the ground are helping us get this through so that we have newborn screening in these states. So in parallel to waiting on the RUSP's decision, we're going state by state to make sure that we have coverage for newborn screening. So it's really important where your voice counts, and that's local government. So think about how you can make a difference there. And I'm happy to say that the group in terms of Minnesota, Ohio, and New York, led by Emma Cefaloni's group out of Rochester, New York, is going to get a baby collaboration going so that we know exactly what to do with these children when they're diagnosed, carrier and people who are Duchenne or Becker. We put them in good care, and then we really help drive that therapy development. So that's ongoing. We've had a lot of meetings with Congress. We're going to have a lot more. Cutting-edge research is important. People come to all of us with good ideas. We'd love to fund all the good ideas. We have a scientific advisory board that is led by Eric Camino here in front, and we really review the science to make sure that our money goes well and it's funded good science so that we can move the field forward. You might remember a long time ago, it seems, I think it was around 2016, that we knew that gene therapy was going to come of age. I will say to you that when my boys were diagnosed, in 86 and 87, the gene was cloned and then the protein product, and one of the scientists said to me, you know, like, this will be easy and it'll be fast. So 30 years later, easy and fast probably weren't good adjectives at the time, but we are in the gene therapy, AAV gene therapy era, which is an amazing place to be. And so we went to Jerry because he was really leading some of the work in gene therapy, and we supplied a grant to Jerry to do the first gene therapy experiment in which he treated 4 children at that time. And we are happy to say that there you have the expanded label, the approval of Sarepta's drug for 4 to 5s last year at this time, and now an expanded label. So we also invest in companies. We try to make sure that the field is full and ripe with innovation because we always want the next generation, the next best thing. We want to drive therapy development because it's important and critical to progress. If we're to get to that point in time, we can totally end Duchenne for people diagnosed. So here's what we did. We have now a registry because I think we don't have now, it's actually greater than 15 years old. But one of the things when we first started was, who has this diagnosis? What do they look like? How's the progression? Who are they seeing? We had lots of questions, which gets back to research. So right now we have a registry led by Ann Martin and a team. We have 5,500 patients in that registry. We started this actually 15 years ago to collect this basic science, and this also drives research forward. And companies are using our data, basic scientists are using our data, and I think this really reflects the need for you to be in the registry if you're not, but for us to have this ongoing data so we better understand, and as therapies are introduced, what those therapies are actually doing, not only in the short term, but in the long term. Enhancing care, Rachel Schrader is sitting in front staring at me, and she'll be up a little bit later. She leads our care team, which is a pretty amazing team of people, and she has led some of the work on the Certified Duchenne Care Center program. So those of you who take advantage of those certified centers probably have heard about her or talked to her on one of the PPMD for Yous or some of her team. And this is really, really important because you have to have basic good care. You have to know where you are and where you're going, and a team of physicians who you trust, who you can talk to, who you can contact. I think this is critically important because that gets you prepared for the trials, because when you ask them about trials and inclusion criteria, what do you need to do or who do you need to contact, this is the first step in that progress. So there are 38 of them, 38 certified Duchenne Care Centers across the United States. We know if we look at a map, there are some holes in the map. We're trying to address that. As you might know, depending on where you live, sometimes you live in a state where the care isn't as good as you would hope for. So we need to work on those areas to bring them up to speed, bring these young physicians in, have them start these clinical teams, and get them in this network. Cardiac care. I'll be very honest with you, I'm very selfish about the heart. I've always asked if you're able to improve skeletal muscle, is that heart built to last? We also know that females who carry or who are carriers also can have critical heart issues. So we wanted to really work on that and maybe answer that question, is that heart built to last? And also be prepared to protect that heart with early intervention of medicines. The cardiologists, Linda Kripe, Chet Villa, Larry Markham, all here talking about, for us, how early can we intervene? Is it cardioprotective? Is that heart then being built to last? And finally, we're going to end up a little bit later this year with cardiac surgeons coming together to talk about, if it's not, can we give these individuals a new heart? Can we transplant them and have them have long, healthy lives? So you'll be hearing more about that. The heart is a major investment for us, and the heart is a muscle too, so we need to think like that. Newborn screening, I mentioned. This is really, really important. All of you in this room should be in favor, hopefully, of newborn screening for all of the generations that come after us, because there will be a time when we have a known cocktail that we could have a baby diagnosed and we could treat them immediately. So that would be a goal. And maybe in the next, soon, I'd like to say the next 10 years, we'll be at that point. So I think this is really an important piece of the puzzle. And so in your state legislatures, newborn screening should be a discussion. So what have we done in terms of what can we expect? For those of you who know my family, when my boys were diagnosed, mean age of diagnosis, 4 and 5 years old, which we haven't changed. That's why newborn screening will hopefully impact that. So we get them at newborns. But when Chris and Pat were diagnosed, the mean age of death was very young, teens. Now it's 30, and people are driving, and people are dating. As a mom, I might be a little shy on that one. Getting married, having their own children. I think the world has changed dramatically, and I'm deeply grateful that it has. We have 38 Duchenne care centers, I said, 4,700 patients receiving care at those centers, and we are improving all of the time the care considerations, because the 2018 publication, while a very good start, Rachel and her team have these topic-specific meetings, GIGU, asking questions about digestion, elimination. Optimized DMD is an endocrine group that is looking across the adrenal issues, steroids, weight gain, lots of things in that area. There's 5 groups in there. And we are, with the Italians, having a meeting on respiratory consensus. How can we improve breathing over time, and what do we need to lift those consensus standards up to what we know today? So this is how research and care really generates changes in clinical management about how care is delivered. Data is important. Data is important through our registry. Data is always important. And I think this is one of the critical factors back to the registry. This is how we learn. Again, this is research, so that we analyze the data and come back to figure out what can we do, what did we learn, what questions are we asking through that data. So this is something that is all of us together to make sure that we understand completely and as thoroughly as possible what that data says to us, what questions it's answering, and how we can move the field. So this is the registry. Again, we're going to harass you about the registry. I hope you'll join. It also offers, Decode Duchenne offers genetic testing. So for people whose insurance doesn't cover it, people who struggle with genetic testing, this is a way to get genetic testing for yourself, for your family members, to shed more light on what are we looking at in terms of genetic testing. The Decode Duchenne program is just what I mentioned. That is the genetic testing program. Ann Martin and Kayla and all of the genetic counselors are here if you have questions about that. We have a drug development roundtable, and this is where we get the companies together and talk about things that are in what we call the preclinical space. So what could we do together? One of the biggest projects that we did together was the harmonization guidelines. And that's one of the outputs of this group getting together and thinking, what in the preclinical space can we work together and change? Benefit risk analysis could be another one. They're called preference studies. We think about in the gene therapy companies, and so this is a plug. If we could standardize the antibody testing for gene therapies so that patients could get testing easily and that they would know if they were eligible for gene therapies or if they were not eligible, and it would identify across all the AAV serotypes. So that's a job for the gene therapy companies and for Craig McDonald sitting here and others to get that together, so we have reference standards, so you get one test and you figure it out, and then we follow along. So if we get to the point of really trying to treat people who have antibodies, so we can lower that threshold and treat them, and then maybe one day redose should we need to do that. This is a big one. I don't know, all of you probably have a good story about navigating the access environment. I know people who've worked for months and years to get access to various therapies. We need to work together to break the barriers down, because, first of all, you shouldn't have to wait years to get a therapy that's going to be useful. You shouldn't have to spend time and energy on the phone talking to either no one or someone who doesn't understand the word Duchenne and have it go up the chain and back down the chain and back up the chain again. So we need to work together on the access environment. Little Hercules is here. We work with them as well. They've been really amazing at really navigating the stage so that we can help push for approvals and access to the therapies that are available to us. So there we are. We have connect groups as well, because I always think about finding your us, finding the person you can lean on, the person you can call at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, I'm really struggling today. We have connect groups in many of the states. If you're interested, we'd love to have you. We have an adult advisory committee. That is pretty spectacular as well. You're going to meet two people next in the Adult Advisory Committee. We serve more than 15,000 families. We have lots of fundraising events. We've raised about $45 million and growing. We really are pushing the envelope. And you can talk to John Killian and he'll tell you I really am pushing the envelope and pushing that board because they are very responsive to the needs and they've been incredibly good and helpful to all of us going forward. So this is PPMD Connect. These are the people in our different states who just connect families. They connect families, they answer questions, they're somebody to lean on, somebody to think about. Just connect. Those coordinators are pretty wonderful and pretty supportive and usually know the ropes if you're really missing out or have a question. So please feel free to connect. We also have a siblings group. We have a grandparents group because as a grandmother myself at this moment, grandparents are really in a hard position, right? Because we raise children better than the parents, come on, right? But it is a hard position because sometimes we worry about not only our own children, but their children, and then we want to take it all on. So we have meetings for them as well. So take advantage of the resources, make friends to lean on. We have virtual socials. I think you know about those. The PAC gets together, the families get together. Also, Rachel Callender is here. We are trying to make her live in the United States, although she lives in Australia, so that's a problem. But she has the Lighthouse groups, which are families who meet, for an hour once a week, and they really share how they're thinking, what they're doing, where they're moving forward. And I'm sure some of the people in this group have been in the Lighthouse series who've been really helpful, resourceful sessions with Rachel. The Adult Advisory Committee, they have an opinion. All of our adult children seem to have opinions. So they're wonderful and have helped us lead in terms of adult care. And we know that we need a model for adult care. We know that adults really struggle because sometimes those institutions that they seek care stop providing that care at a certain age, 18, 21, 26. So that's really hard when you're sprung with no care and you have to piecemeal it together. So Rachel and Jody Wolf, who is new to us, the Chief Program Officer, are going to solve that, next month? Good. Good to know. This is our 20th anniversary of our run program. We run at Disney. We have runs all over, Disney, Houston, Chicago, Disney, East and West Coast. If you're a runner, please consider it. I'm not a runner, but I do the 5 and the 10K sometimes. I usually am swearing by maybe mile 5 on the 10K, but I manage to get through it. So even if you can walk a few miles, it's really good for us. And I think it empowers you to see the crowd that is really running or walking with those red shirts on, doing something different and changing the world. All right, again, I'm immensely proud of us. I think there's power in us. I think you've demonstrated that power. I'm grateful to every scientist, every family, every person, every company who've taken the lead and become passionate about Duchenne. It has been my single passion since I heard the word. I hope it's yours forever. I can't thank you enough for being here. Keep in mind, and if Kim will kill me if I don't say again, in A at 6:15 tonight, we're going to party and we're going to be celebrating all weekend the power of us. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Adith and Colin to come up from the PAC. Where are they? Stop it. All right, stop already. Thank you, but stop already. All right, Colin. Colin and Adith are part of our PAC, so they're going to introduce themselves and talk about what the PAC does. And I'll start, because you're closest, Colin, with you.
Hi, thank you, Pat. It's an honor to speak after you. I'm so grateful and thankful for all you've done for me and my family and all of us here. So I'm Colin Worth. I'm the president of the PAC, the PPMD Adult Advisor Committee. I've been on the PAC since 2016 now. Became the president last year, so I'm just excited to have been involved with this for many years now, and excited that next year will be actually our 10th anniversary already. So yeah, glad to be doing this, and excited to have seen how the PAC has grown since 2015. It's really quite remarkable all that we've accomplished so far. So as you saw in the slide that Pat just presented a few minutes ago, the PAC, we're basically a resource for teens and adults with Duchenne. I mean, we're here for everyone and the families too, but just want to be a resource. And as was mentioned, I mean, community is a big part of what we do. We want to make sure no teens and adults are left out or are, so just to be a resource. So with that, I'll let Adith speak.
Good job. All right.
Hi, everyone. First off, I want to just say it's an absolute honor to be able to follow up after Pat Furlong, who I know is a hero to all of us in this room. My name is Adith Thumalapalli. I'm the vice president of PPMD's Adult Advisory Committee. I joined the PAC in 2020, so it's been 4 years, and I've been vice president for the last year. And it has been an absolute honor to work with some of the most wonderful individuals. Our mission as the PAC is, as adults with Duchenne, Becker, and manifesting carriers, we're dedicated to improving the quality of life for those like us through advocacy, patient outreach, and support and community building. And we actually have a slide that shows some of the projects that we're currently working on. Next slide. So some of the projects that we work on to further our mission, we network with other muscular dystrophy organizations. We're establishing some PAC international groups. We have a quarterly newsletter that goes out to all our CDCCs. We host PAC socials, virtual socials for teens and adults. We're currently working on a drug trial white paper that Colin and I will be presenting at the Drug Development Roundtable later. We help plan for advocacy, Connect conferences, and this conference. We run the teen and adult track. We're working on a PAC grant for individuals with DMD and Becker. We have informational one-pagers. We're working on improving mental health support, and we're starting a project where we're collaborating with engineering students from Virginia Tech to design adaptive equipment. And so that's just a little bit about what we do. We will have a booth at the resource fair later this evening, so please stop by, ask us any questions you might have, and thank you all for listening.